Hey everyone, and welcome to the deep dive. This time, we're diving into the history of the Iu Mien people,
Oh, yeah.
especially for our younger listeners who are maybe just starting to,
Yeah.
connect with their
It's
heritage.
gonna be awesome.
So we're going to cover a lot of ground in this series. I mean,
Right?
we've got historical records, myths, even some Chinese writings that give us, their perspective on the Iu Mien. And it's all about getting a fuller picture
Yeah.
of this really, really long and fascinating history.
It's gonna be cool to see how it all connects to, who the Iu Mien are today.
Right, exactly. Like, how does all this stuff from way back then,
Yeah.
how does it still matter to us now?
Exactly.
So, okay, let's jump right in. I think a good place to start is with the myth of Panhu,
Oh, yeah.
the faithful dog,
Mm.
who ends up marrying the emperor's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story a lot of us grew up with. But I never really thought about,
Yeah.
what it really meant
Right.
until I started, researching for this.
Yeah.
And, I bet a lot of our listeners are in the same boat.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this myth, it's been around for centuries. It's recorded as far back as the 4th century.
Wow.
And it's not just some children's tale or whatever. It played a role in how the Chinese state viewed the Iu Mien.
Really?
Yeah, they used it to portray the Iu Mien as different, maybe even less civilized because of their connection to a dog.
Wow.
Like they were othering them, you know?
So basically using the story to kind of put them down.
Yeah, kind of.
But I mean, do you mean they didn't just accept that, right?
No, not at all. They flipped the script.
Really?
They embraced the Panhu myth and made it a source of pride.
Wow, that's so cool.
It became a symbol of their independence, their ability to live on their own terms,
Hmm.
away from the control of the Chinese empire.
So they took this story that was meant to put them down
Yeah.
and they turned it into something to be proud of.
Exactly. Like turning a negative into a positive.
For resilience, right? And this whole idea of independence, it actually ties directly into the real history of the Iu Mien.
Yeah, totally.
So around 2,000 years ago, historians think that the Iu Mien were living near Dongting Lake in Hunan province. But then, as the Han Chinese started expanding south, the Iu Mien started migrating to the mountains. And it wasn't just about finding new land.
Right. It was strategic. It was about preserving their way of life.
Makes you wonder what it was like back then, constantly having to adapt to these pressures and all that.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about Chinese perspectives and stuff, but the Iu Mien kept their own historical records too, right?
Yeah, they did. They weren't just relying on the Chinese to tell their story.
So what kind of stuff did they record?
Well, they had their own narratives about their origins and their history. These stories talk about 3 ages of their civilization.
Oh, wow.
And they have a creator god named King Pan, who's also known as Bien Hung.
Okay, so King Pan, that's a name I've heard before. But I never knew he was a creator god.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they have their own distinct lineage and cultural development, separate from the Chinese perspective.
Yeah, so you basically have these two parallel narratives. The Chinese view, which often portrays the Iu Mien as outsiders, and then the Iu Mien's own view, which celebrates their independence and, their own unique cultural heritage.
Exactly. And it really highlights how important it is to consider multiple perspectives when we're studying history.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't just take one size word for it,
Right.
You got to look at it from all angles.
Exactly.
And speaking of different perspectives, this gets even more interesting as we move into the Tang Dynasty period.
Oh, yeah.
That's when we start seeing the term Moyao pop up in Chinese records.
Moya. I've heard that term before.
Yeah, it's they're finally acknowledging the Iu Mien as a distinct group with their own customs and everything.
Okay, so it's a recognition moment.
Yeah, kind of.
So what else do we know about the Iu Mien during this time?
Well, we actually have some pretty vivid descriptions of Iu Mien life from Tang-era sources.
Oh, wow.
There are poems that depict them in their mountainous homes.
Really?
Yeah, and there's even this one account from a monk who was complaining about their slash and burn farming techniques.
Oh, wow. A grumpy monk.
Yeah, basically.
But it's cool that we have these glimpses into their daily lives from centuries ago.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
But the Chinese also used other terms besides Moyao, right?
Oh, yeah, they use terms like Yaran and Yaomen, too.
Were those like just different labels for the same group?
Well, yeah, but they also reflect how the Chinese understanding of the Iu Mien was evolving.
Okay.
Like some of these terms were more administrative, just ways to categorize them. But others had kind of negative connotations,
Oh, interesting.
which hints at like the complex and often unequal relationship between the two groups.
So it's like language itself was being used
Hmm.
to kind of shape how people thought about the Iu Mien.
Yeah, exactly. Language can be a powerful tool.
It's like, it makes me think about how much power the Chinese state had over the Iu Mien throughout history.
Yeah, and how the Iu Mien constantly had to resist that power.
Yeah, like
Mm.
their story is full of moments of resistance, of fighting to keep their autonomy.
Mhm.
It must have been so hard to hold on to their cultural identity under that kind of pressure.
It definitely wasn't easy. It was a constant struggle.
So how do they do it?
Well, one key element was the Jimmy or Tusi system.
Jimmy.
Yeah, or Tusi. It lasted for centuries. And it basically involved Yumin chieftains collecting taxes from their own people and then paying tribute to the Chinese emperor.
So it's like this balancing act
Yeah.
between maintaining some local control while still acknowledging the authority of the Chinese state.
Exactly.
Sounds like a recipe for tension.
Oh, it definitely was. And that tension led to a lot of rebellions throughout Chinese dynasties. Yeah, I mean, these weren't just isolated incidents. They were a recurring theme. It shows how much the Iu Mien wanted to preserve their way of life.
I'd love to hear more about like these chieftains who were navigating this Jimatusi system. Like, what were their lives like?
Oh, there are so many stories. For example, during the Yuan dynasty, there was this prominent Iu Mien chieftain named Meng Guang.
Meng Guang.
He was really smart. He used the Jimatusi system to gain favor with the Mongol rulers. And that way, he secured greater autonomy for his people.
So he was playing the game, but to benefit his community.
Exactly. He was strategic. And he even managed to expand their territory.
Wow, so he was successful.
Yeah, he was. He amassed a lot of wealth. And then he invested it back into his community,
Oh, wow.
building infrastructure and promoting trade.
That's amazing.
His leadership shows how the Iu Mien could actually use the system to their advantage, even when things were tough.
Yeah, it's like finding those little pockets of opportunity within a system that's not really designed to help you. But this balancing act couldn't have always worked.
Right, right. There were times when the tensions boiled over and things got really bad.
Like, I remember learning about the Ming Dynasty's crackdown in the 1370s. Wasn't that a particularly brutal time for the EVN?
It was absolutely devastating. The Ming rulers, they implemented these harsh policies to try and stamp out Iu Mien resistance, and it almost wiped them out.
Wow.
It's hard to imagine facing that level of adversity and still holding on to your cultural identity.
So what did they do? How did they survive?
Well, they turned to their spiritual beliefs for strength. They called upon the powerful spirit Hunga Bang Max for protection.
So even when they were facing near extinction, they didn't give up on their faith.
Exactly. It shows how important their beliefs were to them and to their sense of who they were.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And their story didn't end there. Decades later, there was another major uprising.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, the Yao Rebellion of 1832.
The Yao Rebellion. Oh,
It was triggered by all this corruption among local officials and the unfair exploitation of resources, things like salt.
so they were being pushed to their limit.
Exactly.
They fought back.
Yeah, thousands of Iu Mien rose up, and they forced the Qing dynasty to take them seriously.
Wow, so this wasn't just like a small protest. This was a major challenge.
Oh yeah, this is a big deal.
So what happened? Did they achieve their goals?
Well, the rebellion was eventually put down, but it wasn't a total defeat.
Okay.
The Qing government, they realized how serious the situation was, and they actually addressed some of the grievances that had led to the uprising.
So they won some concessions.
Yeah, in a way, it shows that the Iu Mien had the power to negotiate for better treatment, even within a system that often tried to marginalize them.
It's inspiring that they never gave up fighting for their rights, even when the odds were stacked against them.
It's a testament to their resilience and their determination.
But I imagine this constant back and forth,
Yeah.
this struggle to hold on to their culture, it must have a huge impact on Iu Mien identity.
Oh, absolutely. It shaped how they saw themselves and their place in the world.
So all those labels and the myths and the restrictions, they all contributed to this constantly shifting sense of self.
Yeah, think about it. Being told you're descended from a dog, being forced to abandon your ancestral beliefs, being pushed further and further into the mountains, it all shapes how you see yourself.
It's like this story of loss, of having your culture taken away from you bit by bit over generations, like the Ming Dynasty banning King Pan worship,
Oh, yeah.
destroying their temples,
Yeah.
and basically saying their spiritual leader was illegitimate. That must have been devastating.
It was a direct attack on their culture, an attempt to force them to assimilate.
And then on top of that, they lost their fertile lowlands and were forced to move to the less fertile highlands.
It seems almost impossible to overcome those kinds of challenges.
So how do they cope?
Well, they adapted. They found ways to preserve their identity, even in the face of all that pressure.
Give me an example.
Okay, so they couldn't worship King Pan in their temples anymore, right?
Right.
But they started using these 3 celestial posters.
Celestial posters, what are those?
They're these sacred objects, often hand-painted on paper or cloth. They depict King Pan and other important deities.
So they're like portable shrines.
Exactly. They could carry them with them as they moved and maintain a connection to their spiritual beliefs.
That's incredible.
They were carefully preserved and passed down through generations. They became powerful symbols of resilience and cultural continuity.
So it's like they found a way to adapt without compromising their core beliefs.
Yeah, exactly. They were flexible, but they didn't give up on who they were.
It's a good reminder that culture isn't static. It's always evolving. And for the Iu Mien, that evolution was often driven by necessity, by the need to protect their traditions in a world that was constantly trying to change them.
And they were really good at it. Like, they came up with all sorts of creative solutions.
Wow.
Like, have you heard about the passport to travel across the mountains?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so picture this. The Iu Mien are pushed into the highlands. Right.
They need a way to move freely within their territory, maintain connections between different communities, and avoid being completely isolated.
Okay, I'm following.
So what do? They create this system of symbolic tokens.
Tokens?
Yeah, often made from stuff they found in the mountains,
Yes.
like carved wood or knotted cords.
Okay.
And these tokens served as a form of ID and a guarantee of safe passage.
Wow, that's ingenious.
Right.
It's like they created their own internal passport system.
Exactly. And it allowed them to navigate all the challenges of living in this difficult terrain.
So it wasn't just a physical document. It was a symbol of their connection to each other.
And their determination to stay united.
It's really a story of survival, of adapting to survive while holding on to who they are.
And that brings us to a really important question. How did all of this shape the Iu Mien people we know today? That's a question I'm definitely eager to explore further. It makes you realize that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about understanding the forces that have shaped our communities and ourselves. And that's something we can all learn from.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like all those echoes from the past, you know, they still matter today.
Yeah. And shape who the Iu Mien are now.
Yeah, like they went through so much, you know, and it's given them like unique strengths and perspectives that we still see in their communities all over the world.
Yeah, it really makes you think that knowing like where we came from and the challenges our ancestors faced, it helps us understand who we are as a people.
Totally. And as we move into like the modern era, we can see how the Iu Mien have dealt with a world that's changing really fast, you know, while still holding onto their traditions and values.
Yeah, one thing that's always struck me is like how they've kept such a strong sense of community, even though they're spread out across so many different countries.
It's really amazing, right?
Yeah, it's like their history of, you know, migrating and adapting.
Yeah.
It's almost like it prepared them for globalization.
Yeah, you've got a point there. Like that experience of having to move, both within China and then to other countries, it's made them incredibly adaptable.
Right.
But they haven't lost their core cultural identity.
Yeah, and it shows how strong their bonds are.
Yeah.
You know, and how important it is to them to stay connected to their heritage.
For sure.
It makes me think about those celestial posters again.
Yeah.
You know, even though they couldn't worship in temples anymore, they found a new way to practice their faith by carrying those posters with them.
They're like these powerful symbols, you know, of their resilience and their determination to keep their culture alive.
Yeah, it's like they carried a piece of home with them wherever they went.
Exactly.
And it reminds us that culture isn't like this fixed thing. You know, it's always changing and adapting.
Right.
Especially with the Iu Mien, who've had to protect their traditions in a world that's constantly trying to change them.
And as we look at the Iu Mien diaspora, you know their communities in Southeast Asia, the United States, all over the world. We see this playing out in all sorts of interesting ways.
It's like they took the lessons from their past And they used them to build new lives in new places.
Yeah.
And they created these vibrant communities
Yep.
that honor their heritage, but also embrace the new possibilities of their new homes.
Exactly. It's like this fusion of the old and the new.
Yeah, and you see it in their festivals and celebrations,
Oh,
right?
yeah, definitely. You'll see traditional elements mixed with modern influences.
It's a beautiful way to express their evolving identity, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like a celebration of their journey, their resilience, and their enduring spirit.
Yeah, and it's a way for the younger generation to connect with their roots and for elders to share their stories and for the whole community to come together and celebrate who they are.
It's like weaving together the threads of their past, present, and future into this beautiful tapestry.
That's a great way to put it.
And as we learn more about Iu Mien culture, we'll see how this weaving process is happening in their art, their music, their language, even their food.
Oh, I'm already getting hungry just thinking about all the delicious Iu Mien food we're going to explore.
Me too.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's important to remember that preserving culture and adapting it isn't always easy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There are bound to be disagreements, different ideas about how to move forward, while still honoring the past.
Right. Navigating cultural identity is never simple. And there are often differences between generations.
Like younger Iu Mien, sometimes feel caught between the traditions of their elders and the pressures to assimilate into mainstream society.
It's that classic struggle between tradition and modernity. How do you hold on to your identity while also embracing the opportunities of a new world?
It's a tough question, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to it.
Yeah, definitely. But what's so inspiring about the Iu Mien is that they're willing to have these conversations, to talk openly about what it means to be Iu Mien in the 21st century. They're not afraid to shape their culture while still respecting their ancestors.
Yeah, it shows how resilient they are, not just in adapting to outside pressures, but also to the changes happening within their own community.
Exactly. And that open dialogue is so important, especially when it comes to things like language preservation.
Right? Because as younger generations become more integrated into society, there's a real danger of losing those ancestral languages.
It's a challenge for a lot of indigenous communities, but the Iu Mien are actively working to revitalize their languages.
Really?
Yeah, they're creating educational programs, online resources, and they're really encouraging elders to teach the language to younger generations.
That's amazing to hear.
Mhm.
It shows how much they value their linguistic heritage.
Yeah, they understand that language is a cornerstone of cultural identity.
It's not just about preserving words, though, right? It's about preserving a whole way of thinking.
Exactly. Language carries the stories, the wisdom, and the unique worldview of a people. It's a vital part of who they are.
And it's not just about the past either. It's about the future, about giving Iu Mien communities the power to tell their own stories in their own words.
It's about taking back control of their narrative, moving beyond those labels and categories that were imposed on them, and defining themselves on their own terms. It's about celebrating the richness and diversity of Iu Mien culture, recognizing its contributions to the world, and making sure it continues to thrive for generations to come.
It's a powerful reminder that culture isn't some static thing. It's a dynamic force that shapes and is shaped by each generation.
And the Iu Mien story is a perfect example of that. It's a story of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring strength of community.
Okay, so before we move on to the next chapter of Iu Mien history, I want to hear from you, our listeners. What parts of Iu Mien culture are you most curious about? What topics would you like us to explore in our upcoming deep dives? We want to hear your thoughts, your stories, your suggestions. Let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah, it's amazing how they've overcome so much, not just surviving, but thriving
Yeah.
and creating this vibrant culture.
It's really
It
inspiring.
makes me want to learn more about how that resilience is playing out today.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about studying culture, right? It's not just stuck in the past, it's always changing.
Right.
And for the Iu Mien that's happening right now, we can see it in how younger generations are embracing their heritage
Mhm.
and blending tradition with modern stuff to create something totally new.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the Iu Mien music scene. I've heard about artists who are fusing traditional instruments
Yeah.
and melodies with modern genres like hip hop and electronic music.
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be such a cool sound. It's really captivating. They're taking those ancient rhythms and melodies and weaving them into these modern soundscapes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it shows how creative they are and how much they want to keep their musical traditions alive. in a way that speaks to younger people.
It's like a conversation between the past and the present,
Yeah.
expressed through music.
Exactly.
And it's not just music either, right?
No, definitely not. We see it in fashion, visual arts, storytelling. The younger generation is taking inspiration from traditional stuff, but they're reimagining it for today.
That's so cool.
It's this really dynamic back and forth between honoring their roots and, like, pushing boundaries.
But I bet it's not always easy to blend tradition and modernity like that.
Oh, for sure.
I imagine there are disagreements, different opinions about what it means to be Iu Mien in a globalized world.
Yeah, of course. Navigating cultural identity is complicated,
Mm.
and there's no one right way to do it. But the important thing is that they're having those conversations. Different generations coming together, sharing their perspectives,
Yeah.
and shaping the future of their culture.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance
Yeah.
between holding on to the traditions that have sustained them and adapting to the world as it is today.
Absolutely.
And speaking of challenges, we talked earlier about language preservation, which seems like a really, really tough task,
Yeah.
especially with the pressures of assimilation and the dominance of global languages like English.
Yeah, the big concern.
Are there any success stories? Any signs of hope for the future of Iu Mien languages?
Well, there's definitely a growing movement to revitalize them.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, communities are setting up language immersion programs for kids. They're developing online dictionaries, language learning apps, even using meme phrases and songs and popular media.
That's awesome.
It shows how committed they are to keeping their languages alive.
It's really heartwarming to hear that
Yeah.
even with all these challenges, they're not giving up.
Yeah, they're finding creative ways to keep their languages going and passing them on to the next generation. It's so important, because language is like the lifeblood of culture. It carries the stories, the wisdom, the unique perspective of a people. So by revitalizing their languages, they're not just saving words, they're reclaiming their voice, their identity, their power to tell their own story.
It's a reminder that culture isn't just something we inherit. It's something we create and shape for the future.
Exactly.
Well, this deep dive has been incredible. We've uncovered so much history, explored what it means to have a cultural identity, and seen firsthand the amazing resilience of the Iu Mien people.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
We've seen how their past has shaped who they are today
Yeah.
and how they're actively shaping their future.
It's been an honor to learn alongside all of you listening. And we hope this deep dive has made you curious to learn even more about your own Iu Mien heritage.
Before we wrap up, we'd love to hear from you. What resonated with you the most from this episode? What questions do you still have about Iu Mien history and culture? What topics would you like us to explore in future episodes?
Share your thoughts, your stories, your suggestions. Let's keep this conversation going. Remember, this is just the beginning of our journey together. There's so much more to discover, so much more to learn. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the world of the Iu Mien people. Until next time.